This is the FRC Roundtable, coming to you all the way from Minnesota. Your host team 2052 Nightcrawler presents this weekly FRC gathering where FIRST robotics competition teams take cooperation off the field. Share your knowledge, give and get advice, solve a challenge, or celebrate what makes your team special. 3, 2, 1, go!
All right, recording started. Well, thanks everybody. I know that tonight's a busy night since Taylor Swift has a football game, but I appreciate everyone showing up anyway. Joseph's going to lead us in our discussion tonight, but before we do that, I just wanted to do my normal shtick at the start here, that we are, for the hopefully the foreseeable future, we're going to use the Sunday night calls to open up the opportunity for other teams, students, and mentors to host a conversation. So either you can pick a topic and be in charge of keeping the conversation rolling on that topic. Or if you are presenting something at Jumpstart, perhaps, or at a different conference and you want a chance to practice in a nice, safe place and get some good feedback, you can pick a night and you can give a presentation. We've only had one person give a presentation so far. That's Isaac, who's on the call tonight. He gave a CAD presentation last spring. And I think it's the highest viewed video of all the Sunday night calls. So, presentations seem like they're a popular thing to do, despite only having one of them. So if anyone's interested in giving a presentation, that would be great. I did check the sign-up form, and we've got a fair number of people signed up. So that's really exciting. So let's keep it rolling. We were going to do the mini trials kickoff, but since the game materials haven't been released yet, I talked to Ian and Joseph. Well, Ian talked to Joseph earlier today, but we decided to swap this week and next week's conversation. It looks like it was a good thing that we did. So next week, we'll talk about basically a mini trials kickoff. Ian, do you want to kind of give us a 30-second what to expect next week?
Yeah, so hopefully sometime tonight or tomorrow or within the next week, the mini trials game will be released. So every year it uses either the previous season's game piece or something that's commonly found in a robotics shop. So like last year it used cargo from 2022 and pool noodles that were taped into a loop. And in the year before that, it used power cells, but redefined in a different concept in a mock game that teams can use for training. And that seems to be, it's been really helpful for our team. And basically in this meeting, we will be discussing the game, what strategies we think will work, what we think we'll see at the mini trials competitions, things like that. It'll be hopefully similar to our post kickoff analysis roundtable that we had at the very beginning of this year. I think that was like the second roundtable that was ever held.
Yep. I want to echo Ian's thoughts as well. We did mini trials, which was the test last year. It was really good. Our students loved it. And so we're planning to do it again this year too. But even if you're not competing in this pre-tournament thing, just the idea of kind of going through the manual and doing strategy, that'll be great for everybody. So hopefully, even if you're not attending mini trials or participating in mini trials, you might be interested in joining us for that talk. All right, Joseph, the floor is yours. Take it away.
Yeah, thank you. So to those of you who don't know me, I'm Joseph, and I'm the operations captain for Team 2491 Nomythic. So we have Nomythic divides itself into 3 sub-teams, and one of those sub-teams is called operations. It's what other teams might call like a business or outreach sub-team. I know there's lots of different names for it. We call it operations because it includes a wide variety of like different. We do a lot of things here in operations, and I think for a while we've struggled to really define the work of ops into like a solid, cohesive, single sentence like definition. But one that I've been using a lot recently is we are responsible for creating the relationships that help to sustain our team. So for me, having been on the operations sub team for 3 years now, I've realized more and more that all of the work that we do as an operations team is revolves around the relationships that we have to other individuals, organizations. There are so many different connections that help our team thrive and grow and be the best team that we can be. And so I wanted to talk about some of those relationships today. I wrote them all down in a Trello post last week, so I'll pull them up now. But some of our, a lot of the relationships that I could most easily come to mind are inter-team, so our relationships to each other on our team, so on Mythic. Sponsor relationships, our relationship to other teams, other FRC teams, either locally or internationally. Our students and the schools that they go to. So we are, somewhat unique in that we come from 2 different schools. So we have students from Great River and Avalon, and I would love to see us build that relationship with the schools themselves and with the students that go to those schools, families of our students, alumni, and the general public. So in my title and description of tonight, I specified specifically like families and alumni, and I think those were those are more like unique, not talked about as much aspects of relationships of the work that we do that I was particularly interested in, but I also want to open up the floor to any other discussions. I do want to say that I mentioned sponsors in that list, and I think obviously sponsors are really important to the operations or the vitality of any team in an FRC area. But I think that's such a big discussion, and I honestly think that warrants a separate meeting. I know we've had some meetings about sponsors before, could even stand to have more. There's so many different aspects of that, but I think I want to mostly try to steer away from conversations about sponsors and sponsorships in tonight's meeting, and keep the focus mostly on those other relationships that help our teams grow. Yeah, I want to hear people's thoughts. Jeremiah, it looks like you have a hand raised, and then if not, I can get us started with a prompt. But Jeremiah, you have some thoughts?
You can finish your sentence. I'm in no hurry. You can finish your sentence.
Oh, that's kind of it. That's the setup I had in mind. There was some additional questions I have, but if you have a starting thought, great.
No, I don't have anything expertise to say except I have a question for you. I like that there's a lot of students here. So one of the things I know I struggle with my students is that many of them are in multiple activities at school, and that's something it's with the families and the students to choose what to spend their times on. However, one of my goals with the team this year is how to cultivate the way they interact with each other during if we're experiencing success or not, and how to be a better team team culture, because I think Scott probably witnessed some things one of our events last year, and there was one point I had to remove one of my kids, and it's kind of like you take 30 minutes breather, go anywhere else in the in the event center, and just take some time away from the pit. Just how do you guys experience in your team? I really want to hear from a student's perspective what your coaches have done, what you guys have done to engender kind of a team culture among students to students and students to coaches. Because I'm a type A driven person when it comes to projects, but sometimes that's good, and I know sometimes that's not so good. So
it's a great question. a very big question, something we've been considering a lot on Nomadic. I don't know. I can open the floor to other thoughts, but I have my own thoughts. I know, for us, we've talked a lot about like humor is like a thing that we've talked a lot about on No Mythic. There's when you have a team full of adolescents, having fun, we're not going to say that, you can't joke or, humor isn't allowed, because it's going to happen, and it's, part of what makes people coming back. But there is a way to go about it. For a lot of people, humor can be a indicator of a certain culture on a team, and when you have when there's a lot of like jokes, or when there's a certain type of humor that rubs people the wrong way, or can be offensive, or can make people feel uncomfortable, people often feel uncomfortable on the team. A lot of times that's indicative of like the makeup of a team. Lots of times, I noticed that more uncomfortable humor can come from like male identifying students, more so than other students. And I think, humor is something that's really important in the discussion about team culture. I'm interested to hear what other people have to say. I will also say that I think this is a really big conversation. Something we've talked, I think, a little bit about in previous roundtables. I know they're all on YouTube, and you can go back to them. Am I calling on people? Is that?
You don't have to. I raised my hand, and I'll go first. I just wanted to almost like visually remind myself that I had something to say. Jeremiah, in terms of competition, something that I find really helpful and successful on Nightcrawler is we have a lot of setting expectations that happens before we go. So that starts on the family level. We have a travel meeting that's required. One, we talk about, financials and like MSHSL stuff, but also just like, what is the structure of the competition going to look like? Like, let's create a plan so that everybody understands, where we're going, what we're doing, what this looks like. We talk about gracious professionalism a lot, especially when it comes to being in hotels and respecting venues and other guests. That's super important. And then post-event, we also have a process called pluses, deltas, and kudos. So pluses are, we get together as a big group and we talk about, okay, pluses are things that we thought went really well. We want to continue doing those, whether that's, wow, our pit crew was like really on point. They were getting stuff fixed, or, it's chaperones saying, all of my kids were super well behaved and we got places on time. Like, that's amazing. Let's keep doing that. Deltas are things that we want to improve or change, whether that's like, we tried to pre-buy lunches this year and then we lost the tickets, or students didn't understand. So like, we need to improve that. Or if there's behavior things that we notice, we can talk about that as a whole group. And then I really like the process of kudos, where students and mentors specifically shout out other people for things that they see. And I think that helps create a culture that's a little bit less like reprimanding. Obviously we still have that. That's super important, but almost like shouting out the good things that we see and having that positive reinforcement. And I think that's a really important part of that process as well.
Yeah. Sort
And
of.
I'm not being rude to you guys answering my question. I'm actually taking notes. So it seems like I'm like, oh, he's on his cell phone. Not being rude.
Yeah. And I know that's something similar to what we do. We actually do that every night of competition. We gather in a big circle and are like, okay, this is what's happening tomorrow. And then we also go through those, like, what went well, what could go better, and then like affirmations, sort of thank yous. And so I think those work really well. Another thing our team really likes to do is emphasize like breaks and like stepping back. And not just at competitions. Like, I know at competitions, like our pit crew, we will require our pit crew to take breaks, both just for water and like food, but also just like to get away from like the hecticness of it all. And so like saying that like every 2 hours or so you have to take a like 10-15 minute break. And so that really helps sort of like diffuse tensions. But then also like throughout the entire season, we're like, hey, like to be on the team, you need to be in good academic standing, and especially to go to competitions. And so like if you are really like behind on homework or struggling in classes, like we support students to, you know, take a break from practices for a week or so and, you know, really focus on other parts of their life than robotics. And I feel like that's really helpful. Or even in practices, like being like, hey, I need to remove myself from this situation. I need to go out into the hallway and like take a 5-minute break. I feel like that's really helpful for team culture and can really diffuse tension and really help with sort of like, yeah, with like the tension and the like relationships between each other.
Yeah, and I'd kind of piggyback off of what both Dominic and Lexi have been saying about at competition, especially emphasizing breaks. For most of our team, we have, and it differs from role to role, but for the majority of our team, who go through rotating of scouting, and then also we have a pit crew rotation, although that's been in works of being reworked due to some things that we've noticed this season. But we generally try to make people, or try and get it so that people, at least this year, were not actively, having a role to do for a third of the competition, which generally meant a 1 hour break every 2 hours where people were allowed to, this year we are on a scouting alliance with No Mythic. So I hope that people made friends on No Mythic. I haven't actually pulled to see how well that worked out. I probably should do that. But like, hang out with other people. I know a popular thing is just walking through the pits and looking at all of the robots and how they function. That's one of my favorite things to do at competitions. Things like that, where it's like enjoying being in the atmosphere of a competition without necessarily, I have to, record what Blue Robot 3 is doing and how many cones they're getting every single match for 6 hours. And then another thing that I've tried to start implementing this year is a lot of times at competitions, there are roles where people can feel like they're being undervalued or not necessarily recognized by the team, for the hard work they're doing. I think, for example, scouting is definitely one of them. And there were a few other positions we had where, we kind of had identified that from previous seasons and talking to other teams. And something that I tried to do this year was that every night when we were, because when I was leading our, closing discussion of how the day went, all of those things, what I'd try to do is I'd shout out 3 students basically who were, doing a lot of work without necessarily receiving the recognition for that work. So, for example, we have a role who stays in the pits, who basically compiles all of our stays in the stands and compiles all of our scouting information and all of that on matches into a notebook. It's actually on my floor in my room right now, which is kind of showing the disorganization. But like, she would write down basically detailed information on every single match we had, and almost no one on the team, besides obviously Drive Team that was getting that notebook, ran down from the stands before every single strategy meeting. No one on the team really knew that was happening until, that first night where we talked about how there were a lot of matches where we were able to make tactical decisions like, when do we want to balance? Are we going to have to double balance or triple balance? Should we be filling from the right or the left? Where, that wouldn't have been able to happen without having, someone do that. And so, for roles like that where people are like, oh, this is just busy work. It kind of shows, no, here's the outcomes of all of the scouting people are doing. Here's the outcome of all of this work, and it's helping us win.
I wanted to touch on gracious professionalism. Oh, okay. Sorry, I am unmuted. I wanted to touch on gracious professionalism. Lexi, you brought that up, and I think gracious professionalism is like a great thing to follow. It's a great sort of standard that FIRST has set. It's a great guiding principle for FRC teams, but I think it's important to remember that I think it's really important for people to specify, and for teams to specify what types of behavior students should be following. I think, gracious professionalism was created to sort of decrease uncomfortable competitiveness between teams. And there are some things that aren't really addressed in like the principles of GP or gracious professionalism. And I think it's really important for teams to have conversations with their students and even mentors about, what types of behavior are acceptable and unacceptable. And sometimes that requires some uncomfortable conversations. Comfortable culture requires uncomfortable conversations. And I think, for me, something that comes to mind a lot of times when we talk about, like, especially at competitions and just generally environments where students from other teams interact, is sexual harassment. It can be an issue in the FRC community, and I think, I know I've had some weird interactions, and other students have had weird interactions, and I think it's really important to talk about that with your FRC team. I won't get too, into details here, but I think, that is important to have those conversations with your team and with your students and with mentors about, like, what, is appropriate and inappropriate behavior, and appropriate and inappropriate interactions between students. I think, again, just specifying with your team and using GP as a guiding principle, but again, getting into those specifics is really important. Eric, you had your hand raised, and then.
Yeah, I was going back to a previous topic here, and during matches, we expect all students that aren't on the drive team or in the pit crew to do their time in as scouting. And by doing that, then everybody feels involved, and we have less people sort of roaming around. Or basically, the more people are involved, I think it acts as the students act better. You are a part of everything. The other thing we do is every meeting, team meeting, which usually is weekly, we have what's called an awesome sauce box, which is literally like a shoebox, and students and mentors during the week all put in slips of paper saying what the kids did, who did something good that week. And then during the team meeting, the box gets open and start calling out who did things. And usually we have a bag of candy or something that whoever's noted there gets a piece of candy or something. So those are just a couple of things that seem been successful with our team.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any more hands raised. Jeremiah, do you think that was sort of a satisfactory response from people? Do you think you've gathered notes?
So I thank you guys for your responses. And some of those is just, I have sometimes, I'm from a small town, and so sometimes some of the humor and, I personally don't find them sensitive. And then, but I also don't want it to seem like I'm shutting down everything that's, defining humor is, because I also know that as an adult, when we go to competitions and they were to, you know, have any of those humor slips, it would be it wouldn't go very well. And you shouldn't want to do it because a competition is also building the person up as a human being too, you know, so that they don't, you know, carry on bad practices that one day as an adult it will fail them. So I kind of like to be in that role where it's like, hey, you know, you think that's funny in your teenage brain. I used to be a teenager. I would have probably laughed with you then, but now I don't want to laugh with you because I know kind of, you know, it's not acceptable, you know. So sometimes it's just the humor thing, and I'm glad you addressed that because sometimes the humor can go a little too far, and it can be borderline sexual harassment or things, you know, along the line. If you're not used to seeing something, because you see it doesn't mean you should, you know, snicker at it or make a. Usually, they don't realize that non-verbal languages are louder than the things they're saying. Because I'm like, people can read your body cue from across the aisle when you think they're not hearing you. Just kind of be mindful of some of those things. So thanks for all your suggestions because I learned a bit, quite a lot. Sorry.
Sure. Okay, I see some hands up, and I appreciate everyone's input. And this has been like an amazing conversation. It is the 7:30 mark, so I'm wondering if we could redirect. I'd like to point people towards some of our previous roundtable discussions, or sorry, some of Nightcrawler's previous roundtable discussions. We've talked about culture in the past, and sounds like maybe people are interested in having that conversation again, and so might be worth it to add it to the list if anyone wants to host that conversation. But yeah, I want to briefly redirect us towards the initial setup of today's meeting, and I guess it might be helpful to sort of get us going with a little bit of a prompt. So I talk about alumni and parent relations, and I think you know, I talked about relationships being vital to you know, our functioning as a team, and so I want to talk a little bit about like what the role of different relationships are. So obviously, like, you know, sponsors provide us money, our schools provide us students, but I think, you know, when I talk about like parents and alumni, like, you know, some people might be confused as to like, well, like, yeah, they're cool, but like, you know, what do they do for our team? And I think for us, for Nomadic, we're sort of unique in that we have we ask different things of different people, and I'm sure every team is has similar, like, you know, you ask different things of the different people that your team is connected to, and so for us, we have somewhat of a unique relationship with the families that we're connected to, where we provide dinner every night or every practice for our students. We have practices going from 4:30 to 8:30. Which means that we have to provide our students with dinner. And the way we do that is we ask the families of students to host, I believe it's 2 dinners over the course of the entire year. And they have to bring food in, ideally, you know, pay for it, though I'm sure we could provide scholarships for that. And then host dinner, have, you know, set things up. And, you know, it can be sort of a big ask for some of our families. And so we want to make sure that we have an established relationship with our families, so that, like, you know, we're not just interacting with them one time a year to ask them to give us food. And I think, you know, the same can be said for a lot of relationships. I think, like, you know, we ask a lot of the people that, like, surround us on our robotics team, and I think, like, you know, for me, like, you know, I've been operations captain for 2 years now, and, you know, I've been, you know, a big part in, you know, the foundation and, you know, connection with these, like, you know, the vitality of these relationships. But, like, something that was just pointed out to me last year by, like, a new mentor on our team was like, well, like, what are you doing to give back to these people? You know, how are you, how are we as a team, you know, making sure that we are establishing a quality connection with these people and not just asking them once a year for money or food or some other type of, you know, support. And that's really what I wanted to talk about today. And so I guess I have sort of, you know, some questions just to start things off of, like, how what do you ask of like um, the relationships, the different people surrounding your team, the organizations that your team is connected to? What do you ask of them, and how do you build a relationship? How do you build and cultivate and grow those relationships so that you're not, just asking them for money once a year? That's something that we're really looking to improve on in Mythic. So that's what I wanted to talk about tonight.
So we have a very good community that really are, with all the businesses, they have done fantastic in our last 2 years of sponsoring. Some of the businesses went from like giving $50 our first year to giving $500 our second year. So it's kind of one of those relationships that you're like, oh, and some of the gift came with notes of appreciation saying, look, it was really good that you guys are doing this in our neck of the wood, and so forth and so forth. And so this year we did we're gonna be doing like monthly newsletters and send out to those sponsors, and that's something that I also picked up from other teams that they've done that, and I'm like, oh, why not? What can we do that? Yeah, it takes something for one of the kids on the teams to put that together, and I can edit it and make sure, and then it goes out. This summer, when we decided we're gonna try attempting doing a STEM camp, one of the things my principal asked, well, what are you gonna charge people? And I'm like, we're not charging anyone anything. Just knowing that our fan was just saying, hey, for you being part of the community, we had 34 kids in our STEM camp. We were only going for 24, but the principal had a sign up list still on after 24 was passing. It's like we weren't going to say no to any kid, because then that becomes a bad feeling for, oh, my kid was going to do it, but and we made it worked out. Some part of it was disaster, but no one thought it was disaster. I thought it was at some point, but it worked out. And what I've received in the community is that some of the grandparents, like this one guy I ran into, oh, thank you so much. These other programs, they have the older kids, but you guys included our youngest grandkid, and he's still talking about that. And just that's another way I think I thought STEM Camp was a really good initiative, and that's something we plan on continuing, because, I mean, if it is good and it's working out, even though in the background it looked disastrous, just keep playing the show.
I can talk a little bit about the different relationships that we have on Nightcrawler, and I'll start with parents because I have some questions about alumni as well. But over the past years, the things that we've asked of parents has changed. When I think about the most major ones, it's usually been we have a certain section of our parents who volunteer to build our week 0 field for us, which is a huge amount of effort, just because that's a massive project. And then, they're in there every Saturday working on that, building it, painting it. We also have a section of parents who in the past have brought food in January to provide lunches, kind of like Joseph was talking about with dinners, every Saturday for the 6 weeks of build season, because we, feed our mentors and students when they're there working for, 6 to 8 hours. And then the other big thing I think about is chaperoning. Parents, come with us to competition and chaperone kids, and they embark upon the journey of chaos with us, and it's great. And it's also something that is super important. And then finally, we have a lot of sponsor relationships that start with parents, whether that's through employee match, or just, they talk to companies and their employers recognize our impact. And I think for us, the biggest part on giving back to that is showing the impact of robotics and Nightcrawler on their students, and like all that their students are learning, and inviting them to our reveal night and our end of year banquet, and really celebrating like you are as much a part of the accomplishments that we have had, as your student is, as the mentors are, just because we wouldn't be able to do it without you. So that's how Nightcrawler has relationships with our parents. As for alumni, I think one of the biggest things, at least I see with alumni, is one, donations. There have been, just to keep it brief, multiple times in the past couple years that our budgets have been saved by donations from alumni. Like travel has been made possible because of that. So that's huge. And then additionally, a lot of our mentors I don't actually remember the exact proportion, but a bunch of our mentors were on Nightcrawler and have now, graduated, gone and done adult things and come back to be on the team. And so in terms of team sustainability, that's also huge. I want to better connect with our alumni. I think we've talked about like forming a LinkedIn so that people can stay connected and like doing a newsletter. I think, ideally it would be really cool to do something for week 0, but I'm really excited to see what other ideas people have around alumni. Because it's kind of, how do you, once people are scattered to the winds, stay connected, keep them engaged?
Yeah, 3926 actually has, so we've not done too much with our alumni in the past. 3 of our mentors are alumni of the team. One of our mentors is an alum of the school who graduated before the team started. But generally in the past, we haven't really reached out to our alumni. So this year we decided to, start taking a look at doing that. And so one thing we're thinking about doing is looping in our alumni with our annual letter writing campaign. So typically, I've talked about our letter writing campaign on this roundtable in the past, where we write handwritten notes to our family and extended family members, talking about why robotics is meaningful for us, all of that, and then asking for donations. And we're at the point where, because we've been going for about 11 years now, 2012, yeah, that's how math works. We're at the point where we have, a sizable alumni base that has, a good 100 or so people in it. And so we figured, if every member of our team writes 2 or 3 extra handwritten notes, that might, it might start by, reminding the students of back when they were on the team, because this letter writing campaign's been a tradition from, the first year the team has existed, or for a long time at least, before I was around. And so, and then, hopefully they'll see, that's still something that is giving value and meaning towards students of the team. And we're hoping that will be successful. We're also thinking about getting a mailing list, because we already run a newsletter, and we figured, why aren't we sharing this with our alumni? Why aren't we sharing this with, more people? And hopefully with those things and, inviting them to kick off, we can form a better network, regardless of whether they're sticking around in Minnesota or not. Because unfortunately for Minnesota, seems like a lot of engineering people end up leaving the state. Although a lot also stick around, which is nice.
Yeah, I realized that I set up like the conversation about families, but didn't really talk about alumni. And yeah, I mean, Lexi, we're similar in that, our alumni love to donate. When we did our first GoFundMe campaign, when we applied for Worlds 2 years ago, I think like there was like a slew of I think almost all of our like old team captains had donated to our GoFundMe, and we ended up raising like around 16,000, not just from them. They did not all just raise that 16,000 by themselves, but that was a very successful fundraiser, and it was made possible in part by our alumni. And so that's obviously we want to maintain these relationships, because our alumni love to donate, and we love any people that would love to donate to Nemithic. But I think I can speak for myself in that I also have an interest in establishing alumni, because there is a genuine want for that. I mean, I should say that I approach this conversation from the perspective of a soon-to-be alumni of FRC Robotics. I'm sure Ian, Lexi, you can relate. I'm sure there are other seniors in the club that can relate as well. But like I'm not going to be on the team next year, and that's sad. But I'm looking for any way that I can to still interact from a safe distance with the team, and be able to give back or just keep stay in the loop about what's going on the team. I think like so many FRC teams, like students will join them, and then hopefully they're these teams are somewhat transformative in the lives of their students, and their students leaves, and like they don't come back or interact in any way, but there is that want, and I think I think that's part of the reason why I'm so interested in establishing more of a relationship with our alums, because there is such a want for that. Eric Schaefer, I think you had your hand up first.
Yeah, we've been fortunate. We have a lot of our mentors are alumni. But say at least half of them are actually, their parents have stuck with the team, even as they took off to college, whatever, and they've sort of brought their kids back to mentor later. So that's actually quite a few of our alumni mentors have their parents are still mentors on the team. So I don't know if you can keep your parents on the team after their kids leave. That's a good drag back to get their kids back. If anybody else has had that luck.
Yeah, we've had some of that luck. I think we've had that once or twice. One issue I guess we're having is getting emails for alumni, because while alumni are on the team, they use their school email, and then we never really get their personal email when they graduate, because by the time they graduate, they're no longer checking Slack for communication and whatnot. And so I would be interested in hearing about how other teams sort of get that other form of communication to alumni.
Yeah, our alumni are encouraged to stay on our Slack channel. That way, they stay interacting with the team. So, as I said, I think that's done a lot, because then they haven't really left the team, even though for a year they're not allowed to come back anyway. But they are still encouraged to share or be in contact with the team on our Slack channel.
That's really interesting. Oh, you go, Ian.
No, you can go.
Okay. I was going to say that's really interesting, Eric, because we kind of have an opposite policy on Nightcrawler, where once it's the fall after you graduate, our newly made alumni are removed from our Slack. Obviously, we still encourage them to follow us on social media and whatnot. And I think to Dominic's point of like, how do we stay connected? I think that's our idea with LinkedIn, is the fact that we can like reach out to people and be like, hey, we know you were on the team, like we have old rosters and stuff. Like, would you like to stay connected with us? And that way it can kind of help people rediscover their network and stay connected in that way. And I think the advantage is, you're more inviting rather than just like hoping that people reach out and send you their email or something like that. Our Slack policy, I mean, obviously that's been around a lot longer than I have. If Scott feels necessary to comment on that, he can. I think it's mostly in the same way that we don't have like people can't come back to be mentors for 4 years. I think it's just a continuation of that mostly. But that's really interesting.
have a 1 year that you're not allowed to come back. But that means they're still have a lot connection with their team. After a year, they can come back as a mentor.
So, Eric, I have a follow-up question to your comment on Slack. It sounds like you've seen a lot of benefits to keeping the students connected, even after they go off to college. Have you seen any things that any down pitfalls to that?
We've had one student that was giving poor advice to, as a mentor, it's you on a sort of the edge or line as to what you can say to your team to try and tell them what to do. But then you might have a student come back and say, well, I'm so connected with you that they'll follow his advice rather than the mentor's advice. So that has happened once. I was trying to figure that out. So yeah, that is a drawback. But as I said, they are not allowed to mentor for a year. But after that year, we've had a lot of students become mentors again. And I think most categorically, it's their parents are still with the team. So we have a lot of our student mentors from college are actually joining their parents who didn't leave when they left.
Yeah, and so jumping in about Slack usage, 3926 is similar to Talon in that most people either leave the Slack or just not super active, and our alumni aren't really active in our Slack. But for example, at competitions, like they'll be watching from home and then they'll be cheering us along. So like, for example, during our finals run at Northern Lights, it was super cool to see all of our alumni be like, way to go, and then like, drive team, keep hydrated, and encouraging messages like that. And it was just like super cool to see all of these alumni keeping engaged and like celebrating the team's success, like winning our first team attribute award since 2014, all of those things. It was just super cool to see everyone from the past who I think our team has a really strong culture of like we talk about our old leadership a lot, and kind of we talk about team history a lot. And so it's really cool to see, almost in some ways, these people that you hear about a lot, like Brennan Boyle, who started the team and was like super integral to like getting the team off the ground, and like other people, and then seeing them participate. Actually, I don't think he is still in the Slack, but other people in that vein who are still in the Slack and just like commenting on the team's success. And then one thing we do to help keep in touch, this is what I was going to jump in with on being able to maintain relationships with our alumni. At least we have contact information, them all, is that one of our mentors, so she collects the email addresses. She's been doing this for a while now, of all of our alumni, and then every June she includes all of the recently graduated alumni in like basically a reunion party. I have heard that it's really fun and goes super late at night. I'm excited that I will be invited to one next summer, but also dreading the fact that means that I will no longer be on the team, and also terrified that that's in like just 9 months. But we have steps to get there first. We still have 30 days before our first college deadlines.
Yeah, we don't talk about that. We don't talk about that.
Yeah, so this is what's been going through my head today. But Yeah, I think having that, once a year reunion where people in town, get together, where it's, just the alumni to reminisce, I think that has a good thing for I honestly I can't speak to it very much, obviously, as a non-alumni member of the team. But yeah.
Well, we invite our alumni to our team banquet at the end of the year, and also we invite them to come to tournaments. They can't be, mentoring at the tournament, but that doesn't mean they can't be cheering us on. And we do have quite a few. It's nice to see them, especially at 10K because it's local. And we'll have they say we create or we have the rules that they can't mentor, but that doesn't mean they can't stay engaged with the team.
Yeah, Ian, I love the idea of a alumni party or a team reunion. I think that's something that we've floated the idea around on a Mythic. It's just a matter of, as Dominic said, contacts for our alumni. We're struggling to be able to figure out how to contact all of our alumni. Eric, we have a similar policy on Mythic where a lot of our students will stay on our Slack, but I think there are two big difficulties with that, and one is that for a lot of students they connect to Slack through their school email, which, as Dominic said, become deactivated. I think like for GRS, it's never entirely like a set date that they deactivate them, but it eventually happens, and then those students no longer have access to Slack. And I think second of all, and more commonly, students just aren't checking Slack, especially like year after they leave the team. I think a lot of our students they love and appreciate the time that they spent on the team, but by the time that the end of their senior year rolls around, they're ready to move on to another stage in their life, and they are not checking Slack as often. And then I think for some of them it just becomes sort of a habit of they don't check Slack as often after that. And so I do think that is important to keep in mind. It's like I think Slack for us is a great communication tool. I think for alumni it would be, I think, beneficial to us to look at other communication channels. As Dominic said, I think we're trying to be able to connect to our alumni through email. It's just that can become a little difficult. Lexi, I love the idea of encouraging students to follow social media and connecting through alumni that way. I'm really interested to hear more about alumni communication.
We also have a Discord channel that they are part of, and that's much more informal than the Slack for the team. So I think I see more connections still there as well. I mean, there is a blackout period right now that we don't hear anything from alumni. They're the ones just leaving for sure, or more concentrating on their first year of college. But eventually we do get connections back, especially once the tournament season starts.
I want to return to parents and families for a little bit because I remembered something that our team does. So we have a couple mentors on the team who are like, they're a part of the team, but they're like more like helpers than they are like mentors. They're choosing to step back a little bit for their own support, but they're still helping out the team. And they're both parents of a student on our team. And one of those parent mentors is I forget what the title of her role is, but she is the I think like parent coordinator or something related to that. Like Erasmus, one of you can check me on that. But she sort of keeps in contact with all of our parents. I think they set up a Slack channel specifically for parents on the team. So they have they set up a Slack so that parents can communicate. More involved parents can volunteer for certain things. When there's a need for we are trying to get all 31, I think, of our students to a cabin that's an hour and a half away. We might need some carpooling. Would anyone be up for that? We have more involved parents that are able to step up that way. But I think it's also a great thing to be able to maintain the relationships between those parents and involve them in the team in other ways. So I think I have heard, obviously I haven't attended this as someone who is not a parent of the student on the team, but apparently there was some sort of parent meetup or maybe even a book club after I think load in for our Minneapolis competition or something like that, where parents could meet with each other and with some mentors on the team, and just sort of be in community with each other. I'm sure they were talking about my child is on the team and away from us for so long, and I think that was a great sort of opportunity for some of our parents and students on our team to be able to get involved with the team a little bit more and to be a little bit more in the loop, because I think that's really important to us, is to make sure that all of the people that are supporting us feel in the loop with what's going on the team and can feel like they're a part of the community in some way. And I think that's part of how we do that, parents. Jeremiah, you have your hand raised?
Yeah, sounds like a great. I like the whole parent discussion you guys got going on. How do you get your parents involved? Because right now, I got one set of parents who are fantastic, like those parents you guys are talking about. And I don't want those two people to burn out, because I have the rest of my other parents more of expecting but not putting in. I feel like in my community with the parents that when the kids are playing the Holy Grail sports, they're super involved with those, with the other stuff. But when it's robotics, it's oh yeah, that thing they go to, when the other thing is not happening, kind of. So how do you? I want to change that sentiment, and I've been working hard to change that sentiment in my school. And so, how do you get the parents to be as super involved as you guys are describing? Because that's really great to hear that some of you got those parents, stepping up and doing those things that they are doing on your teams. That's awesome. And I'm just trying to see, how did you start that in your school? At least.
Sorry, Scott, you.
Jeremiah, my piece of advice, I grew up in a small town very similar to where you're at right now, and I can guess sort of how the community works in that small town based on my experience. You have to build practice field elements. Ask your parents to build them. Send an email out to all the parents. See if you can get somebody who will kind of donate their workshop or their garage, and try, because as a parent, so I've been a parent of a student who went through on the team. And my first year, I spent half my team helping programmers and half my time building field elements for a week zero field. And so that first year, I felt more comfortable coming in and cutting 2x4s and plywood, because that's something I knew how to do. I didn't have to engage with the students directly, and I didn't have that comfort level yet of what's the appropriate way to do that. But it was something very easy for me to do. And this may sound weird, but you're kind of going to get the right parents because they want to do hands-on work, and they're builders, and some of those might become mentors because they have that tactile or spatial awareness or something like that too. But I feel like you need to find things that are super easily accessible for the right demographic. And cutting things out of plywood and 2x4s for a lot of parents. And having grown up in a small town, everybody's sort of their own handyman type thing. At least that was my experience, is that people did a lot of their own work.
It still is.
Yeah. And so I'm guessing, in a smaller town, rural community, there's a lot of people that have a lot of good kind of builder skills. And so that might be a really good, easy way for your community to get hands-on involved. You've heard about the meals that get prepared. If you do all-day meetings,
We don't.
you can get parents.
We couldn't do that. It would never probably go past.
Okay.
So yeah, that's sort of thing. And the question to follow up with that is, when you have all those parents that are having those super involvement with the students, do you have them do the first inspires safety videos? Those do you? Because,
Well, we don't have the parents go through the YPP stuff if
Mhm.
they're not interacting with students. So if you're just bringing in meals or you're building field elements, that's not a student interaction situation. So we don't have to run them through the YPP. I mean, for sure, it's a great thing to publish, right, and distribute to your parents. But in terms of requiring them to go through that, if they're not interacting with the students, then we don't need to do that.
Okay.
I think one way that you could do meals that is not like where everyone has to do it is like for the big events, like kickoff. You can have a super engaged parent. You can send out an email being like, "Hey, we have kickoff this year. It's super big. Would one person be willing to step up and provide a lunch or whatever for our meeting?" Or like, and I know that's where we at least have our sponsors do that. But I feel like that could be a really easy way for some parents to get involved. And then you don't have to worry about maintaining that sort of momentum of getting meals every week or so. Just because it's like a one-off event.
Yeah, I'll echo Dominic. I'll echo your point about sponsors. We have a couple sponsors that will donate a meal during competitions, and those are those are really great for our team and for the parents of students on our team. Means that they don't have to provide another meal, and I think something worth looking into if you're a team that's doing sponsorships is getting in contact with an organization or a restaurant, I believe, that provides meals. I will say that I think obviously it's important to keep in mind that we don't, we're aware that like different parents and different families are gonna interact with the team differently and are gonna have different levels of involvement. I do think that something that Lexi, you brought this up earlier, but just I think making it clear to families the impact that your team has on its students, both, and we had a presentation, an open house last year when we qualified for Worlds, where we invited families to come and we told them a little bit about that impact, about the impact that this team has on their students. But I think it's so much more effective when that comes from the student themselves, when parents can see that oh yeah, this team genuinely has an impact on our students. And I when I'm thinking about this now, I don't know if we if we talk about that enough, as a team, if we encourage our students to really have those conversations with their parents. I mean, obviously, the relationship between a student and their parent is sometimes complicated, and that's nothing we can control. But I think, it might be worth encouraging our students to talk to their parents about, oh yeah, I legitimately enjoy my time on the team, and these are the way that it's impacted me. I also think a common frustration for parents of students in FRC teams is that their students put so much energy into their robotics team and then don't have as much emotional availability at home. And I think again, that's nothing we can control on an FRC team, but I think I would be interested in us sort of addressing that and talking about that as a team with um, again, like Dominic said, set limits and boundaries for yourself, and notice when you're giving so much to the team that you're not putting as much into other areas of your life, and that we don't talk about enough as adolescents, or think about is home life and family relationships, and that's important too. And I think that's something that, again, you have very limited control over the relationship that students have with their families, but I think can be very helpful in setting up those relationships between a team and the families. David? Oh, sorry. Oh, Lexi, I think you had your hand up first.
Yeah, David actually had his raised first, so I want you to make your point, David.
Well, as we were talking about parent involvement and meals and stuff like that, one of the issues at our school is about half of the student population qualifies for free and reduced lunch. So we have, a lot of families that come from very diverse socioeconomic backgrounds. So when we do a meal, we usually do them on Saturdays for our all-day practice. We will break down the meal, and we will say, "Hey, can you bring a 2 pound bag of cheese? Can you bring, you know, a jar of taco sauce? Can you bring some hamburger to make tacos? Can somebody get the Doritos to make the walking tacos?" So it's more work on our mentor parts, but we understand that it's a way for our families to get involved and only have to spend $4 or $5 to help provide a meal. So if we get all of our families to do a little bit, they all get a little bit of buy-in for everything. And then the same when we take our traveling regional, we will send out a sign up genius to all of our parents, saying, "Hey, can you pick up a box of Rice Krispie bars? Can you get some fruit snacks? Can you get some of this? Can you get some of that?" And some of our better off parents will pick up more of the stuff on the list. But it gives every family a chance to do something to support the team, even though it's just a bag of cheese. It's a huge contribution for them to the team. So everybody feels involved and everybody has a buy-in to the team.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point, David. And yeah, absolutely. When we do our lunches on Saturdays, it's like, if your family's volunteering that week, like bring a crock pot of something, and like definitely you're not doing the whole table, because that would be a lot, especially like given the size of our team and the amount of people that we're feeding. The other thing I want to just talk about is on the communication end. There's a lot of, especially with it being a robotics team, and like I come from a family where like maybe we aren't so handy or like with the tools or everything, but making it really accessible, even on the volunteering side, to be like, hey, we just need somebody this week to like pick up the robot from the school and bring it to an elementary school, because we're doing a demo. Or if you can just sit with kids at the farmers market and they'll do all the talking, but like just be there to supervise. Making that really clear and accessible also helps a lot. And we do, for us, we communicate with parents through email as well, through like a weekly update. And so I'll send out that and I'll be like, this is parents, these are your line item to do's, whether that's like registration or, getting something checked off for travel, or if it's just like, hey, we really need this thing on the team right now. Like, I'm going to try and share that with you all. But the communicating and the making things, impactful and easy is also, super important.
Okay, this is Eric. We start out the season with a meeting that's a parents' night, and we bring all the parents in with their students to describe exactly what's going on, what to expect from the season, so that they really trying to get them involved early. We have a distinct difference between mentors and parents, and we encourage as many parents to become vetted. Our main goal, we have a lot of mentors, but during build season, we have a lot of hours, and we need just what I say, warm bodies of parents, of mentors to be in the room. They do not have to do anything. They just have to physically be there so that the students can be there. Without mentors in our build room, students can't be there. And we also encourage to have two there so that we can split up and do some practices in another part of the building. So we usually try and have two mentors there whenever the students are working tools. The other thing we have is a big night we call Robots and Rotini. And this is where we trying to get all the families in. We sell, the kids sort of sell so many tickets to all their families or neighbors. This happens probably in October or early November. There we'll ask some parents, just donate some pasta, donate some sauce, but anyway, we try and get as many parents and, the families involved with the teams. Then when we have the breakout night or the morning that day, we'll have a pancake breakfast, and we'll ask parents, can you flip some pancakes, just to get involved, or can you clean up or do something, mix some orange juice kind of thing. But we, I guess more we're trying to keep the parents involved through the entire season and make sure they know what's going on and encourage them highly just to get vetted so that they could be there with the students. They don't need any skills. And that's just as important to us.
I have a question that's related to everything that is a lot of things that have been said tonight, but really isn't on topic, and that's about Slack. It seems to me that Slack has sort of become the way robotics teams communicate. There's an FRC Slack for Minnesota teams. We have recently found ourselves in the situation where the school has blocked Slack because they say that it does not conform to the Minnesota State High School Student Privacy Act that was passed last year. And despite the fact that the policy applies to student educational information, and we have none of that in our Slack, they're blocking it for everyone, for all use. So it can't be used in the classroom. So therefore they blocked it for everyone. So that makes it kind of tricky for us, for students who might be, our meetings are late in the evening, but if they stay after school, then they won't get any messages on Slack before the meeting. If there's an announcement of, hey, it's going to snow, we're not going to have a meeting, or we're going to meet in this room instead of this room because there's a wrestling tournament or something. And I'm concerned that our primary communication system has been blocked. I don't have a problem with it being blocked during the school day because students should be focusing on school. But the fact that it's not available at all in the school, even during activity time, concerns me. And I'm not aware of any alternative that even would meet the state high school or the High School Student Privacy Act. In fact, nothing Google meets that unless you connect through a student email address where they can lock you out of things. But if you connect with either anonymously or with a personal email account, nothing YouTube, nothing Google, nothing, anything is going to comply with that standard. So I'm struggling. Joseph?
I know Jason isn't here, but I know the Technocrats are somewhat unique in that they actually use GChat. So they set up a GChat system. Is that possible for Nightcrawler?
We're trying.
We're trying. The challenge there is that you have to be in the domain. And so that leaves out our mentors who are kind of part-time mentors. It leaves out our parents who aren't part of the Team 2052 account. We are very close. We think we're very close to letting, the school has said, oh, the team2052.com domain and the moundsviewschools.org domain, we will allow those two to coexist in GChat. The connectivity still hasn't kind of been worked out. We're confident we can solve that technical problem. But it still leaves out of the loop anybody who's not a full-time mentor or student. And there's not that many of them, but there still are some that are left behind.
I haven't looked into it at all, and I'm not even sure if this functionality is something that exists, but I know there's a lot of like Gmail and Google like add-ins you can put into Slack. So I don't know if it would be possible, like if you send out like important updates to both email and then it automatically also pushes the important update to Slack. Because I know for 3926 right now, while our school does not ban Slack, we're dealing with a similar issue with our new members, because the way our new members kind of filter in, it's like they kind of filter in staggered, because some new members have fall sports, or some new members, all of those other things that causes people to show up later in the season, so we get like 1 or 2 new students a day. But we had a bunch of students who came to our interest meeting, and then they gave us their emails. And so for the students who aren't yet in the Slack, because we don't generally get them in the Slack until like their second meeting or so, because we want to make sure that that they want to be on the team, because sometimes people go to one meeting and they're like, robotics isn't for me, and that's totally cool. So we try to get it in on their second meeting, but until then, we're trying to, for example, this Thursday night we have a new families meeting, and we've been communicating about that through email, and things like that. And then there's always the issue of high schoolers and checking their emails, is not a mix that people are good at. I responded to an email that I was supposed to 2 weeks ago, just today. So I'm equally bad about this.
No, you're not the only one. I check my email once every 3 days, but I see Slack every 30 minutes probably. It's just it's
Slack-
unfortunate that Slack seems to have been the perfect solution for our team, and it sounds like for many teams. And now it's not an option because you're not allowed to use it for in the classroom, but they've blocked it for everyone now.
Yeah, and I think
our emails are, I know our email contacts cannot be school. We request they're not school emails. So that might be part of Slack too, is that I'm not positive, it might not be tied to school emails. We make sure that we stay outside of that.
Yeah, that if for us it doesn't matter. The app and the website, they won't even connect. It's totally blocked.
I know one thing about Slack, and I don't know if there's another application that can kind of do this, because I know that 3926's issue with emails, and I think a lot of people's issues with emails is it feels like really formal in a way where, like, if I'm writing an email, I spend 30 minutes thinking of what I'm writing, then I'll have someone look over it to make sure that it looks good, and then I'll send it. And like, maybe it's just a bunch of teenagers are terrible at writing emails, because we need like a class in school about how to write. But I feel like there's probably a general feeling amongst people, because when we've tried to communicate by email, we've had those struggles versus Slack, where it's like kind of more just like in a way where it's like more casual, short lines of text.
Yeah, and well, you're never going to get a consensus. You're never going to make a decision over email in an hour or even a day. Anyway, all right. Well, I was just curious to know if anyone else had either experienced this problem or had said, "Oh yeah, we avoided that whole problem by doing this instead, and it works better." But that's fine. I was just curious.
Yeah, I know one thing that happened last year with our team was somehow we use Google Groups to make sure that our confidential data for about students is being protected in our drive, and making sure that only mentors have access to that data. And somehow things were being funky with because we have both Great River domain emails and Avalon domain emails. Somehow they didn't like that, and I think it was that students couldn't join Google Groups outside of their domain. And so one thing that we looked into was getting a no mythic domain. And we didn't really pursue it that much, but that could be a possible solution with sort of to both connect to alumni. If everyone gets a team email, that team email gets to continue, and then also sort of getting around school policies. But I don't particularly know how much work that would be, or whether it would actually solve that issue.
My thought is not related to Slack at all. I just wanted to make sure it happened before the end of the meeting. So if anybody else has things that they want to say about Slack, I will wait. Okay. If not, this was something that I forgot to talk about with parent engagement, but has been really successful, is inviting parents. Obviously, if they can come to a regional, whether that's 10K or something like that, that's amazing. But that's all the way in, February, April, March. So something that we love to emphasize is coming to our preseason competitions. Usually they're closer, they're one day, just show up for an hour or two. You definitely don't have to be there. But it gets people into oh, this is what my kid is doing. Because a lot of, especially when we have freshmen come in, robotics, what does that even mean? Even if we've had info night, or maybe they didn't make info night. So that's a really great way to say this is what your kid is going to be doing all year, and isn't it so fun and exciting? So that's just another tip on that.
Joseph, do you have anything you want to do to wrap up our conversation tonight?
I think so. This has been really helpful, really informative. Thank you all so much for engaging in this. Again, this is something we've been trying to build on. And so I'm sure we will use this information to good use.
I want to give two kudos. One is we've had more students talk on this Sunday night call than ever before. I'm very excited. Congratulations to all of you for participating in that. And likewise, I've spoken the least I've ever spoken, and everybody else wins when that happens. So thank you for keeping the conversation rolling. I'm very excited to not have to carry the conversation most nights. So this has been great. I really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you, Joseph, for suggesting it and leading us tonight. That was awesome. And still, I just checked my email. Still no mini trials. So I was told 9 p.m.
I've been reloading Chief Delphi. So the latest it's going to be is 9 p.m. I've been reloading Chief Delphi every 5 minutes, in the background of the. Although to be honest, I'm reloading Chief Delphi in the background of.
Maybe it might end up being 9 p.m. California time. We'll see. Hawaii, maybe 9 p.m. Hawaii time.
I think my most embarrassing first robotics moment was when I sent a Chief Delphi link and I pinged our team's coach, Mr. Shapiro, while I was in the middle of his physics class.
Okay, excellent. That's funny. All right, so next week we're going to talk about mini trials, as Ian said. Also, if you scroll back in the chat, there's the Sign Up Genius if you are interested in hosting a topic or giving a presentation. When I looked yesterday, There's only one more available Sunday between now and Jumpstart. So if anyone's giving a Jumpstart presentation and they want to practice, you got one open spot before Jumpstart. But obviously you can do it later too. But it's also on the weekly email. So if you're a part of the weekly email list, a reminder for the Sunday Night Calls, there's also a place there that you can sign up to get to the Sign Up Genius if you want to host a conversation. All right. Any final thoughts before we go watch Taylor Swift's football game?
Hearing some need for potentially a FRC senior support group. It's possibly a action item from today's meeting.
You know, I feel like having an alumni party might have been the best suggestion for getting people to sign up for, give their personal email or phone number or something to say, yeah, let me know when there's that party. And then you kind of hit them up with, hey, by the way, come help build a field and run a concession stand and do all that stuff too.
And something that could be kind of cool is an FRC graduation. I don't know.
Well, there's already first signing day, but I would totally be down to organizing something like for Minnesota FRC graduation with like all of the seniors across first Minnesota, or at least, you know, the Twin Cities would probably be the easiest way to do it.
One of the things that we do at our banquet every year is we bring in the last 4 years worth of robots, so our seniors can have their photo taken with their last 4 robots. You could bring your seniors and bring your last 4 robots. That'd be a lot of robots.
I would cry so much, and I'm so ready for that.
It's tragic because we scrap our robots.
Yeah, a lot of teams do.
Which is we keep like the defining features in like our little museum area in our shop though. So like we still have the insane 720-degree turret from 2022.
See, there you go. We had we do tear some of our robots that don't make very good demo robots. We end up cannibalizing a lot of parts off it, but we try to keep the shell, like you said, the defining features, and then you can kind of duct tape some stuff back on it for photos at the banquet if you need to. But
yeah, until very recently, we had like sort of the opposite problem where we still had like our 2017 robot in the school storage. And I went in there one time and I was like, Michael, what is this doing in here? And he's like, it's so pretty and sentimental. And I'm like, I'm sure it is, but it's also half disassembled and still taking up space in our school storage.
Joseph, you have to make a wall. We have a whole wall of our shop that's just things that don't get thrown away. And instead we're like, well, it's art now. And we put it on the wall.
yeah, but
And
you have
then
to talk.
look at it for inspiration. You know, like
We have our museum wall of, this is the part that broke in the finals of 24. But you got to talk to somebody who's been on the team a long time for them to know the story. But yeah, we have that museum wall of things that have a story behind them. But we don't do a good job of like archiving the story so new students can learn about it.
yeah, that's also helpful for us. So, for example, some of the geometry for what will be placed on our swerve base for MRI, which I've talked to some people in this call about, and it's probably too long to describe now, but people see it. It's based on our 2018 wings, where we had 2 wings that would fold out, so we'd do a triple buddy climb on the scale. And so we looked at that and we're like, for methods of how we made things passively fall down, because we are doing a passive intake thing, although it might actually be actuated now because the issue is we haven't been having build people in the lab. But then we downloaded some of the hype blocks that Jesse talked about last week, and I printed some of them out, and they happened to work really well to the point where I, a non-build person, was able to mount a Neo and a gearbox through the max planetaries and everything to a piece of 1x1 in the span of about 30 minutes without knowing what I was doing. So that was pretty cool.
That's cool. All right, final thoughts. 1, 2, 3, go.
Thank you, Joseph.
All right.
Thank you.
Have a great week, everyone. See you next week.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
That's it for this week's FRC Roundtable. Join us live all season long, every Sunday night. Visit the website at team2052.com/roundtable to sign up for weekly invites. In the meantime, keep building, keep learning, and we'll see you next week.